Greetings and welcome to the pod. My name is Mark West. Scott Bortelli is an acclaimed wildlife and underwater photographer and has swum with whales and other magnificent creatures of the deep in some of the world's most exotic locations, like Antarctica, Tonga, the Falkland Islands, and Norway. Among other awards, Scott was awarded Wildlife Photographer of the Year in 2016, and he runs tours that you can join up with around the world to swim with whales. I started my chat with Scott by asking him what came first, being a photographer or a diver.
Yeah, I think I was a diver first, and then just going to all these destinations meant that, I was putting myself in interesting environments, so it made sense that I start photographing and documenting them. So yeah, when I managed to start doing this sort of stuff and traveling a lot, it was one of those things that I've found that you could swim with whales in South Pacific, and it sounded like a great idea. And then, 18 years later, that's how long I've been doing it now.
And you've expanded a bit beyond the South Pacific. You've swum with whales in everywhere from Antarctica to the Northern Hemisphere, haven't you?
Yeah. So I because the basis of my photography these days is sort of tour operations. So I'm taking people to experience wildlife encounters in different parts of the world. And predominantly it's underwater related things, but I do a lot of land-based wildlife as well. So places like Antarctica, I do a bit of both. I take people scuba diving in Antarctica. We're generally trying to get in the water with leopard seals and penguins and the occasional whale. Then up in Norway, we do the orcas. So take people snorkeling with the orcas up in the Norway, in the fjords up there, which is quite amazing, very spectacular, beautiful place. And the orcas up there feeding during the winter months. So you get the bonus of having orcas in the water and seeing the northern lights. So it's quite beautiful. And I take people, to different parts of the world for, sperm whales as well. But the primary trips I run and the experiences I do are the humpback whales in Tonga.
And what's it like swimming with such creatures? I mean, orcas they eat sharks, right? They're pretty dangerous.
Well,
what's it like?
Not necessarily. So orcas, for example, there's lots of different types of orcas. There's orcas that eat mammals. There's orcas that just eat fish. The ones up in Norway are fish-eating orcas, so they don't eat mammals like seals and things like that. And there's different behaviors from different animals. But swimming with whales, each species has different behaviors, so it's quite a unique experience. Like when you're in the water with the humpbacks, they're quite curious, charismatic. They like to interact. With the orcas, they're quite a dominant apex predator. So they're a species up there that are hunting for food and in that area. And then, sperm whales are quite shy whales. You'll get in the water and, you'll be 200 meters away and they'll spot you and then they'll dive to the depths for about 45 minutes to an hour. So, each species is quite different with quite different behavior, but none of them are threatening, like as in, nothing to fear in the ocean in terms of whales. They're pretty intelligent creatures. So spending time with them is quite a privilege.
And what are the whales that you'll see off Sydney at the moment? I guess they're the ones heading to Tonga. What species of whales are they?
Yeah, so we've got humpbacks that come up the east coast and west coast of Australia, and they're migrating up to the more tropical waters. So the ones that come up the east coast of Australia, passing Sydney at the moment, they're heading up to the Great Barrier Reef and up to that area in the tropics. So they're not necessarily the ones going up to Tonga. The ones going up to Tonga are usually the ones that go past New Zealand, or maybe just further into the South Pacific. So there's different groups of humpbacks like that come up as groups. So you've got the groups that come up the east coast of Australia, the ones that go to New Zealand, the ones that go to Tahiti, and so on and so forth. So yeah, so the ones we're seeing are humpbacks, and generally they're the ones you see coming close to the shoreline, and you'll see most often.
Do you ever see the same ones that you're aware of? Are they distinctive patterns?
Yeah, there is distinctive ways to identify them, and we have this program, a research program that I set up about 4 or 5 years ago in Tonga, where we take pictures of their tails, the underside of their tail, and it's like a fingerprint. So it's a good way to identify if a whale, if we've seen a whale before, if it's been spotted somewhere else. And we work with a few different organisations that actually do the identification as well. So if they see one down in Antarctica that we spotted in Tonga, then we get a notification saying, "Oh, we saw your whale because you put a tail shot here, and we've got a tail shot." So it's quite fascinating when you do get data back from different organisations that are seeing the whales not only in Tonga, where we might see the same whale over a number of consecutive years, but also in other regions where they migrate to, so migrating south to Antarctica and north to the tropics.
And does it work the same in the Northern Hemisphere with the orcas? Do they follow the warm water like that as well?
The orcas, like I said, there's different sorts of species. There's resident orcas, there's transient orcas, there's orcas that are hunting mammals, there are orcas that are hunting fish. So they are not necessarily doing an annual migration. Some of them might be staying in an area because there is food source there. Others might be migrating to an area because they know, for example, like the fish and the salmon and the herring up in the Northern Hemisphere, like in Norway and further north, the orcas know that at a certain time of year there's a mass congregation of these fish, school fish, and they'll go hunting there. So, yeah, orcas are different in terms of their behaviour and their migratory patterns than humpbacks.
There's a really cool story I read. Lynn Cox is an amazing ocean swimmer. She swam in Antarctica and all sorts of places. And one day she was swimming off the coast and ended up swimming with a baby whale who seemed to have been isolated from its mother. And she didn't want to go back into shore because she thought the baby whale might follow her and beach her. And she was out there for ages until the mother finally came after some communication, and the mum came and checked her out. And she felt this sort of connection with the whales, like there was some form of understanding. Do you feel something like that? I mean, you see them all the time now. Do you still feel that same magic?
Yeah, look, there's definitely situations where the connection's stronger and there's sort of a mutual sort of understanding or a mutual interaction, or like even just a mutual respect that you do feel with many of the whales. They all have different personalities too, and some are nonchalant and couldn't care that you're there or not. Others are a bit more curious. Some are cautious. Some are just not even interested and will move away from you. And yeah, look, the babies are very curious to start with, and the older the baby, the bolder it gets. And that's also, with the mothers. If the mothers are older and they've had a few babies, they usually feel less threatened. So often, they'll shut their eyes and hover and sleep at 10 meters and let the baby go up and down and play with the humans. So, the experience is different each time. And there are definitely connections that people make with, other mammals, especially intelligent mammals. I think the one issue we do have as, people who don't really understand, the intricacies of, communication and intelligence of creatures like this is we anthropomorphize, animals. We give them traits, human traits, thinking, oh yeah, they must be feeling happy or sad, or they must like me and all this sort of stuff. So you've got to be conscious not to be doing that, because we don't know how they communicate on what level, or what their sense of us is. So it's nice that people do have a connection, because it gives them a connection with the ocean, and they might feel that that's exactly what the whale was doing for them. But at the same time, they're wild animals. We don't know too much about them. So it's one of those things that, like, I take every experience the way it is, and for what it means at the time to me. But to sort of portray that to someone else and say, this is what the whale was doing, or this is how the whale felt with my presence, or vice versa, is something I try not to speculate.
And what should you do then if you actually end up swimming with a whale? Like, I don't even know if this is really possible, but if you're off the coast somewhere and you've gone for a swim and you're swimming with whales or big creatures like that, what should you do? Are there any kind of rules of thumb?
Yeah, look, it's different. Like, obviously there's, local laws in many countries about what you can and can't do with cetaceans in the water. And, sometimes they're very opportunistic. You might be swimming along and a whale might come up. They are curious, intelligent creatures, and you're a different creature in the water. Like, you've got to think these animals travel thousands of kilometers each year, back and forth. They see so many things.
I see a
They
lot of
see
stuff. Yeah.
sharks and dolphins and whales and fish. They're seeing all these, you know, other creatures in their environment. So they're not unsure that there are other creatures around. They even see boats and things like that. So they are familiar with all these things that are in our sort of world. And you're basically in the water. You're a slow moving creature. And of course they're going to be curious and go, well, all the fish and the dolphins, they swim fast and they do this and that. But these slow moving creatures that really can't hold their breath long and don't move too fast, what are they? So, in terms of what you do, like, with most cetaceans, the encounters aren't aggressive. They're a matter of curiosity. So, staying still, enjoying the moment, watching what the behavior is, and just, being cautious is probably, what you would do as an individual in the water. It's not likely that those situations will happen that often, but, for someone to experience that, it's probably, it could be life-changing for them. It could, bring them, into a reality that is like, we need to protect our oceans from everything, pollution and, various plights that they face. So, these animals live in an ocean, and this ocean, is, not infinite in its resources. So, we do need to be conscious of that.
In your 18 years doing this, have you noticed any big changes? I mean, whale migration patterns probably haven't changed that much, but have you noticed more plastic pollution, for instance, or anything like that? Has anything really changed over the last 20 odd years?
Yeah, I'd say in terms of what I see, it's not a huge dramatic change because we're seeing the whales in one environment, so we're not seeing them where they're migrating. We're not seeing them where they're down their feeding grounds. Look, plastic pollution is probably the biggest problem for the ocean, the planet. And, these animals ingest, they can ingest, plastics and microplastics and things that break down into smaller things. So, they're at a certain level in the food chain. They're eating krill, and the krill's eating certain things, and the fish are eating the krill. There's a chain of events that pollution will affect, and you see it a lot in many sort of whales that have washed up on shore and been given like an autopsy, and there are toxic chemicals and plastics in their system. So it's one of those things that, like, I might not have seen it personally, but it's becoming more, there's more awareness for it because people are realizing that, this is, how plastic affects most of the animals in the ocean. Turtles, for example, are, they see plastics like a jellyfish, and jellyfish are, one of their food sources. So when they eat a plastic bag or something like that, and it gets in their, intestines, and, they die, like, they can't get rid of these things out of their system. So, it's one of those things, like, the world is creating, pollutions, and people are more aware of it, at least these days. Not so much, government's doing anything about it, but, at least people are more aware, and people are conscious that, as an individual, yes, they can make a change, but, it's not an easy process, and we indirectly always impact on these animals that can't do anything for themselves.
I was just having a look at your amazing photos, scottportelli.com. Anyone can to browse through them, and they're phenomenal photos. But what does it sound like to swim with whales? Is it quiet? Is it noisy?
Yeah, look, it's quite interesting because there are whales do vocalize a lot and they communicate with sounds. So when you're around them, there could be many things happening. I've been in the water with singers, and the males are the only ones that sing. So they sing a
Okay.
particular song each year, um, and that sound you can be floating over the top of a whale that's 15 meters down, and that sound is vibrating through your body like the bass of a stereo, and that sound can also be heard from 40 kilometers away.
Wow.
So, you know, these acoustic animals are communicating through sound, and you often hear it with the mothers and calves as well. The mother will be making squeaks and clicks, to sort of communicate with the baby, to sort of say, "Hey, don't go too far on here."
Yeah.
So yeah, and sometimes it's silent. Sometimes they're just floating, maybe just resting, or maybe just interacting, but not on a social communicating level. So, but when you do hear the sounds of whales underwater, it's a pretty amazing experience. And when you feel the sound going through your body, it's even more prominent that these creatures are massive, beautiful creatures that emanating this amazing sound. It's quite haunting.
And you've been down to Baffin Island, or up, sorry, to Baffin Island in the Arctic, and also Antarctica as well. So where haven't you been? I mean, what's it like at the ends of the earth?
Yeah, look, I love the polar regions. They're just spectacular. Like you've got these massive, beautiful icy landscapes and topography and environments that are just so unique and so alien. And you've got some of the coolest creatures. You go north and you've got polar bears and walruses and Arctic foxes and various other creatures. And you go south and you've got penguins and whales and seals and things like that. It's just these environments, these harsh, unforgiving environments, and you've got life thriving like crazy. It's just spectacular ends of the earth. Like it's one of my favorite areas to visit. Like obviously I have visited a lot of places over the years, and not all of them. I've still got many places to visit. But the polar regions, I keep being drawn back to the polar regions, and a lot of my tours these days are either in Antarctica or in the Arctic regions, like Arctic or Norway.
So how do you get there? I mean, to get to Antarctica, you go through Argentina?
Yeah, so you can go to South America, and there's a few options, but basically you're going from the bottom of South America, usually Argentina. You're on a ship for 2.5 days down to the peninsula, and then you spend time in the peninsula, looking at the wildlife, the animals, the landscape, and just experiencing Antarctica. And then you travel back by ship. So it's ship based. The good thing about expedition ships is they're usually a lot smaller than a cruise ship. And the thing about cruise ships is because they have so many passengers, they're not actually allowed to land in Antarctica. So there are a lot of restrictions to keep the environment pristine. So you have to be on a ship that has less than 200 passengers to be able to get out on land and go on excursions in Antarctica. So it's a pretty special place, pretty restricted and protected, by quite a interesting organisation that just makes sure that all tour operators down there abide by the same sort of rules. So it's a great experience.
And in up north, you go from Reykjavik in Iceland and you end up in Canada, and you sea kayak. I mean, this is
Yeah,
this
so
is adventure holiday sort of
yeah,
stuff.
well, so yeah, that's right, exactly. It is for the more adventurous people. So you can go up north or south, and you can kayak. Sometimes we take scuba divers in down to Antarctica, and scuba diving in places in the Arctic. In places like Norway, obviously you've got orcas, and you're in these icy fjords. So these are spectacular places, and they're designed. They're basically places designed for adventurers, like people who want to trek mountains or kayak fjords or look for wildlife.
Yeah, and you swim? How thick is your wetsuit in these in these places?
Well, I use a dry suit when I'm in the polar region. So basically, it's suit that keeps everything, dry underneath. So you have layers of clothing, like thermal layer, then a fleece or a down sort of layer, and then you have your dry suit over the top. So, and that's keeps you warm. It's the insulation of the air between your body and the suit that keeps you warm in these places. But you're in -1 degree water, and cold is cold. Like eventually you will get cold,
Yeah.
even in a dry suit. But it's not many. Like there's not many people on the planet that can say they've been in the water in Antarctica, with leopard seals and whales and penguins. So it's one of those things that, like, when I do take people, it's amazing to see people's faces once they get in this environment and put themselves out there to sort of get in the water and experience Antarctica or the polar regions by getting into them.
Do you ever just get in your Speedos for 2 seconds and then get out?
Well, a few people do the polar plunge,
Yeah.
and that's usually they'll jump off the ship, get into the ice cold water and be out 2 seconds later. I try to avoid that. I like the comfort of my warm, dry suit.
Yeah, yeah. And is there where on earth do you want to go? Where haven't you been? What's the dream
so
place if you haven't already done
Yeah,
it?
look, there's so many places, and including my own back door, and country. Like next year, I plan to go around Australia for a whole year, and we're going to document that over a period of 360 days, going around Australia, seeing some amazing places, seeing wildlife, cultural events, everything. So there's lots of places I haven't seen. More places in the polar regions. I'd like to spend more time in Iceland, Greenland, northern Canada, like North America. There's some interesting places. Russia, I'd definitely like to get to Russia and do some ice diving or some wildlife watching. It's pretty spectacular there. So yeah, the list goes on, and the more you travel, meet people who are like-minded, the more your list gets bigger and bigger.
Wow, going around Australia for a year would be amazing. And so you're driving and then just stopping where you want to?
So basically I'm driving around Australia in a four-wheel drive. I'm trailing a boat behind me, and we're going to dive. We're going to do everything on land. We're going to get in the air and take aerial photos. Basically, it's to document Australia from below the waves, on the surface, and above.
Yeah.
And it is going to be set up like a proper 360-degree social media campaign event, like a marketing event. So you'll be able to follow our trails around Australia for a year.
Okay, cool.
Lots of video blogs and social media and just adventures that and even competitions, so people can join us on a leg of the tour. So that to me is going to be pretty spectacular, just being able to see Australia, the way I want to see it.
That'll be fun. You're going to have a GPS track so we can see where you are?
Yeah, GPS tracking, maps, Google Maps, everything. So you'll be able to follow us. You'll be able to even say, hey, you should go here, and we'll go there.
Oh, that's awesome. So that's amazing. And so that's next year. What's the rest of this year bring?
Yeah, so this year, a lot of the time my schedule is fully booked, and I spend probably 9 months a year away from home. So, coming up, I've got the Lord Howe Island photographic shootout event, followed by I do a workshop down in South Australia to get after cuttlefish and the leafy sea dragon. So I take a small group to do that. Then the Tonga season starts, which is mid-July to mid-October. And then I hit the end of the year, and it comes back to my Antarctic season. So I do 2 or 3 trips down in Antarctica, and then a trip to the Falklands. So by end of December this year, my schedule is completely booked.
Yeah, and then you get a year. Well, it's not going to be a year off, really, is it? It's just going to be a year doing something else.
A year doing something else. But it should be amazing. Like I said, I'm excited about seeing my own country properly.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds amazing. I will definitely be following you in the various social media places. So if we want to know all about you, where should people go?
Yeah, look, you could follow me on Instagram, which is, always an interesting way to see my adventures as well as see some of the beautiful things that I see. So that's scott.portelli on Instagram. If you are keen to follow the the 360 trip around Australia. That's going to be called 360and360.com. So you can follow us on the website or on Instagram, 360and360.
Probably got to ask about sharks and people who have a fear of sharks swimming. You clearly don't have such a fear. Have you ever dived with sharks or had any hairy experiences?
And I spend a lot of time with sharks. I love sharks. They're interesting creatures, and all sharks, once again, they behave differently. So everyone always puts them in the one bag of sharks. If you thought about it, really, they're just a big grey fish. They're just another fish in the ocean. The reality is it's an irrational fear created by media and, movies and things like that, because the reality is, last year alone, there were only, I think the number was 5 fatalities in Australia from sharks, something low like that. If you think about it, millions and millions of people get in the water each summer, each day, and, there's only been 5 shark attacks. It's a pretty low chance that, sharks are actually ever going to get you. And they're not lurking around and stuff. It's usually, mistaken identity or people in the water at the wrong time of day, dusk and dawn when they're actually starting to, feed and hunt. Look, sharks are amazing creatures. We need them for the ecosystem. If they don't control the ecosystem, then other species take over. And, then that, can ruin the environment, the underwater environment. The other big issue is, sharks are being killed in the millions, in Asia for fins and for soup and things like that. And the bodies and the bycatch is thrown back into the ocean and not even used. So people are wasting. There's so much wastage, for people who are, hunting and killing sharks. Like I said, you need these predators in the environment, or they're not, going to be able to control, the ecosystem. So I think, sharks are amazing. If you're scared of sharks, the best way to do is get in the water with someone that will show you a shark, and then you'll never be scared of one again.
That's good advice. And they're very rarely spotted around off the coast here. Really, they're not really hanging out at the beaches, are they? Jaws has a lot to answer for.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, everyone associates it. When they see, think of sharks or see a picture in the media. The media always show you a big great white with its teeth open. The likelihood, there's so many shark species around Australia that you wouldn't even notice. You're swimming next to them, and they're harmless. They're small, tiny, dusky whalers that you swim with, at Manly Beach this time of year, and everyone loves to, swim and look at the sharks. And then there's, wobbegons. There's all these sharks that are just bottom feeders and feed on little crustaceans, so you never see them on the surface. So there's so many sharks around that you would not even notice, or you'd probably think it was just another fish. And yet, people, have this fear of them because they think, it's going to be this big shark lurking around. Those sort of sharks are deep sea sharks anyway, so the chances of you actually spotting one are very, very rare. But, like I said, all the sharks are different, just people put them into one bag.
Thanks very much for joining us for this episode of The Pod. Thanks very much to Scott Portelli for taking the time to chat to us about all his various underwater adventures. And if you'd like to find out any more information about anything you've heard today, perhaps you want to follow Scott in his new adventures or join up with him on a tour around the world, get over to the website at www.thepodpodcast.net. That's www.thepodpodcast.net. Thanks again. My name's Mark West. I'll catch you next time on The Pod.